Hi. You might be pleased to hear that this is probably the last video clip I'm going to release for the moment, at least. This one together with two others. One called World Appeal to End Syria and all Wars, and another one, The One True Message of God, together with this one. I do feel that the problem that we have really in the world is that, yes, it's the message of God that we're all believing in, and we're only believing in parts of it because we're only reading parts of the books, the Bible and the Quran, and therefore we don't see the errors. And then we get entrenched in certain words that we know, and then we become very fixed in this idea that we have, and we're not willing to allow other words in because we maybe fear that there isn't a God, or it's a challenge. But I can only reiterate to all believers, be they Muslim, Christian, Catholics or similar, that we need to, that there is a God. I do believe there is a God. I have experienced his power, as have many, but we can't go on believing things that don't bring these miracles that Christ at least said would occur. And that also we need to look again at the Trinity in particular, and that the preaching by the Christian Church that Jesus is God as well as being the Son of God, which isn't right, and the Muslims do also agree with this, that's not right, and I agree with it as well. And therefore I really do appeal to the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Pope to look into this, because it's really very significant, and this teaching is hindering the world really in many ways, even with regard to contraception and this sort of thing. And it's no more an individual faith issue. We really must deal with this, and not be happy with just this Christian, this faith or other faith that just brings something, we believe in love and fairness and this sort of thing, but doesn't bring the miracles. And even when we believe in the love and that sort of thing, it doesn't really translate into the people. And the Muslim faith as well, look at what's occurring with the Muslim faith. People say, yes, there's a majority that believe in a peaceful form of the Muslim faith, but the book doesn't support that. So as I just appeal to all faiths to read a certain myth.com, and to really look, but read both books. Once you read a certain myth, if you don't believe what I've said in there, and I have provided the scriptures, then you must read the Bible and the Quran before you do anything, particularly those who decide they want to be suicide bombers. If you're just relying on words that leaders have said to you, or one or two verses that you've seen in the Bible or Quran, then you're dying on a false message, because you need to read all of the books. And as I say, I've read it. I'm 60 now. I've been looking into this for 60 years, and what I've put in a certain myth is the cream of the jug of milk, and the milk is the Bible and the Quran, and you've got to read all of that milk before you get the cream of the message. Now, the cream of the message, I believe, is what I provided in a certain myth, because it, which is free to read online, a certain myth.com. Also go into a certain battle.com website, which there's links there. But you can read this book, this cream of the message of God, in the space of 1 to 3 hours. It's taken me 60 years of life and of reading, so it's not something that I've just conjured up in a few minutes or in a few hours or a few years. It's something that is a lifetime's work, really. And as I said, I have experienced the power of God 5 times in 1988, which is in another book I have, A Certain Life with a Certain Message, which is not free at the moment, but the significant descriptions of what happened in 1988 is on a certain battle.com on the website there, under the heading the Certain series. So please have a look at that. And the other issue I wanted to speak to you about, as well as looking at the two videos I've just mentioned earlier, video clips that I'm going to release today as well, is that we we're all really, even in the secular world, we're entrenched in our minds in certain thought processes up to the level of our knowledge. For instance, the issue with the poppies, some TV presenters and footballers and other celebrities are not wearing the poppy because they mostly, not the footballer, but the TV presenters, news presenters, particularly, but they say they don't want to promote a charity that make it greater or more significance than other charities, which they feel by wearing the poppy they are doing. But all I can say to that is that please consider this other viewpoint, is that the poppy appeal is not a charity like other charities. It's actually it's a charity remembering those that have lost their lives, fighting for this freedom that we have, that we can speak freely in England and America and the European countries, and free from oppression. I'm sure you know that more than I. And it's not like a charity where you're raising money for cancer research or for the children or similar, which are very significant charities, of course. But this is actually a remembrance of people that have died. Thousands have died. And they didn't really have the choice whether they wanted to go and fight or not. They had to go and fight because either the country would have been overrun by Hitler and his armies, or they would have been shot anyway, I believe, or similar if they hadn't have gone to war. But nevertheless, they lost their lives. Even my father, he went to the Middle East for 4 years, taken from his village where he'd never moved or been further than the nearest town before, going from Liverpool all the way down to Africa, up to Jerusalem, through the Middle East. He spoke of, there being quicksands there. He spoke of being outside the area of safety at one point where he was on reconnaissance and the rest of the army had been taken. He was advised to go back because they met somebody along the way. Unfortunately, his platoon or similar had been taken by the Germans, and he went back and was with another platoon or similar. But the thing is, to me, sinking in a quicksand is as bad as having your throat slit by IS. Now, these men died for this, or sacrificed a good chunk of their life and their youth, and even those that survived suffered psychologically or wounds or similar. And I think to wear a poppy for something like this, for all these men that are allowing us, particularly TV news presenters, to speak freely in England, and for all the world, all our countries to be able to speak freely as we do, and to be able to vote and this sort of thing for the people we want to represent us, is not insignificant. And I think that, again, these presenters, they've obviously feel they're making a stand and being fair, but the thing is, they're not looking at the whole aspect, this area that I've just spoken about, as deeply as they should, perhaps. Although there are many that don't wear poppies, so if they still feel that that's the case, then I leave it to them. But I do feel that, it's a symbolic thing, and we're dishonouring those people and their effort and their sacrifice and the loss they had. And for those that say we're honouring the glorious dead, it's not the glorious meaning it's a glorious thing to go to war. It definitely isn't. And even those Syrians that are fleeing from it, not wanting to die for war, and I can understand that. I don't want to promote war, but our soldiers didn't have that option. They had to go and fight, like it or not. So we should consider this sacrifice, even though they're not here to represent themselves. I mean, in that, I think we're duty bound to remember them, because it's the glory of their sacrifice, their courage that they went and they had to face these dangers, like my father had to face the danger of falling into a quicksand or being caught by the Germans. And those soldiers that go to fight IS and similar, go with great danger as well of being caught by IS. So I just ask these TV presenters and others who don't like to wear the poppy to just reconsider this. But I respect their decision anyway. The other thing too is I think with regard to the refugees that, as I mentioned before, none of us are perfect. The refugees won't be perfect. And the refugees are coming from a different mindset. They've come with a different history of how you behave, how you obey laws, how they've got a different belief in what God is and what we should do. Many of them still believe probably in the Sharia law, and that women can be stoned or anyone can be stoned if they break that law or have their hands cut off or similar. Now we have people who have arrived in Cyprus and they're setting fire to tents because they want to go to Germany. But the thing is, refugees are coming to Europe. We have laws here as well, and the law states that you apply for asylum in the country that you first arrive at. Now, there are many that are not doing that, and by law, the European country is not really allowed for asylum seekers to pass through one country to the next, as these asylum refugees want to go on to Germany. And then to set a fire to tents that have been provided and paid for by the taxpayers, the British taxpayer in this situation, and having their food provided by the British taxpayer, is not a good thing. We have to abide by laws, and it's not a case that you're in the Middle East now, and the situation won't work. If you're going to come into Europe and then you find that maybe the flats that you have are not quite as warm, not quite as big, or you don't get a flat at all, as many already don't have, and the fact that some will be quite angry here because there are some still on the streets not having flats, and some still that have to be in a bed and breakfast or similar, because there are not enough homes here, and that the health system is also almost failing, and because and it will get worse if we take in more and more refugees. And who is going to pay for you all too? And we have maybe more jobs perhaps in Syria, but the thing is there's many people that don't have jobs. And if you come as well, there are people that are going to say, well, because you came, we don't have a job now. And you're going to it's not going to be easy here either, because common sense has to prevail. And if you come creating aggression and riots because things are not quite as you thought, then we're going to have a lot of trouble. And I say to all those celebrities, as I've said before, and the politicians that say we should be taking more, and the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Pope that keep saying we should take more, that they're not being sensible. They're not looking at the whole view, the whole picture, because you're not looking that we haven't got enough money, that we haven't got enough jobs, that we haven't got enough houses, and that also the Christian faith leaders that are saying we should take more, you're actually saying take more, but let the taxpayer pay for them. Now, if you were going to say take more, the faith leaders, the church leaders, then I ask that you place a substantial amount of what the church is holding, which is millions, I think, towards the support of the refugees, maybe even the £10,000 that the politicians and the church leaders have put, and the celebrities have put pressure on the government for us to take in this next 5 years. And if you're not going to do that, I'd ask them on the media to say why they don't want to do that. because it's very easy to give away other people's money, and you're giving away the taxpayers' money, and you're giving away those that are on benefit already their option of maybe having a home when they're already on the street. And there's a limit to what we can pay for. And although I come from the Christian faith and have been a nurse, when I have compassion. My mother died very young. When I was very young, I was 23, but my sister was only 12. And I know what it is to suffer along these lines. And I'm not without compassion for the refugees, but we have to be pragmatic in these things. And again, my main focus on this particular video clip is that we all become entrenched in our own viewpoint, because we don't look at we don't have full knowledge in the whole area. For instance, the Christian leaders, the Pope, the Archbishop of Canterbury, are looking at the compassionate view, but they're not looking at the realistic view about the money that needs to be provided, and that the money is coming from the taxpayer, which is the poor. Quite often, the poor that are going to suffer anyway. The money comes from the taxpayer, which comes from everybody, but the poor who are on the benefit and that sort of thing are the ones that will suffer, because it will be going to the refugees that you say we should be taking more of. And the insufficient knowledge we have of the Bible and the Quran, we're either looking at the Bible or looking at the Quran, or looking at parts of it, parts of verses in the Quran or parts of verses in the Bible. And then we get all this disorder, when in fact we should look at all of them, when we're not looking at that whole overall view of both of these books. And we have an issue now with Egypt coming here and saying that because the UK government has sent over more security and have banned flights to go into Egypt, which is going to affect their tourist industry, which I can understand. But what do they expect the government to do? To allow planes to fly, and then there's another bomb? And what will they say to another 200 lives lost, to the UK residents where the lives have lost? It's not. You're not being sensible. You're not looking at the overall picture again, and to say that because the UK government have done this, and that therefore you won't listen to other viewpoints or other issues that might be discussed, because they've trying to protect the residents here, which we would expect them to do, is again not looking at the overall picture, and is not being sensible again. It's not being it's being too emotional about the issue. And I think too that the Middle Eastern world doesn't place as much value on life if somebody dies, perhaps, because obviously in the Quran it says that if you die for your religion, or even kill others for your religion, you may go to paradise at that moment. Now, there's no proof that these words are true, and if you read the Bible as well, you realise that and the Quran together, you realise that isn't what the whole message of God is, because there's supposed to be the miraculous now, which has already occurred in some lives. So because of this belief in the Quran only, because again the Quran says, or the teachers of the Quran say that we should only believe in the prophet of the Quran, when in fact the Quran says that we should read the scriptures aforetime as well, which is the Bible, and it also says we should make no distinction between the prophets, meaning that we should not honour one above the other, so that we should look at all the prophets, which means Christ and Moses, that's in the Bible, and all the prophets in the Bible as well as the Quran. So and as I say, we're trying to protect life in the West, and obviously we need to, if we're going to have so many refugees and an amalgamation, as it were, of peoples, which probably is a good thing, but we have to get this message of God right. We are all the image of God, as Christ is, which means likeness. And when God's Spirit comes into us, then we all become as God is, because that power is meant to be with us. But as I say, coming again, we all have this issue where we don't always have the full knowledge of every aspect of life, be it science. We need to, even Christians, need to have a better basis of science and physics, which can be very simply known by certain DVDs, which I've put on my website, certainbattle.com. You will see that they're listed there, about 7 of them. If we all watch those worldwide, we would all have a basis of knowledge of the history of humankind, of how we've evolved, what science is and what the universe is, the astronomy is. Very quickly, very simply, even from children from 10 onwards, we all need this early on in life, in our schools, and to be accessed worldwide, and even a certain myth, be it improved, to be accessible worldwide, and from school age, so that we have the basis of this message of God, the basis of who we are, quickly, simply, something that everybody can understand, even those that are not academic. So this, as I say, is probably my last video like this, except that I may do a section for those entitled Letter to a Teenager, which will be directed to the youth of the world. And I hope also that we may also have English as the second language throughout the world. Not because I'm English or it's any better than any other language, because it is so most widely spoken. It is the most utilised and second language of most people, and that if we could all understand each other in one language worldwide, we would be making significant steps to resolving many of the misunderstandings we have. And I appeal also to the Muslim leaders of Iran, of the Saudi Arabia, also to allow this knowledge on the DVDs to come through, to allow the certain myth to come through, to be allowed to be accessible to the people, because it's not inciting people to violence, it's bringing people to obey rules of the country you're in, but to be allowed the knowledge of this basis of knowledge that we have, to be allowed to speak English so that we can all communicate, to allow that we should have this one message of God established, which includes the reading of the Quran, and science, which the Muslim world has brought and preserved much of the science, I believe, over the centuries. And let us come together as a whole people to really fully remove these errors that we are all preaching, not because we intend to distort them. We're still in this milk of the word, and we haven't creamed off that cream of the message because we haven't gone deeply enough into it. So please, everybody, and the world leaders and church leaders and all leaders, be they of the synagogues or the mosques, or the Christian churches as well, please look into this, I beg you, that we may progress in society once and for all. And maybe Christ will come, if there is indeed a true message in these books, the Bible and the Quran. As I say, I have experienced the power of God. I haven't experienced healing, which has made me doubt it, and looked into the science of life. And believe me, once you allow this, these other ideas in, these thoughts in, there is great beauty in science and quantum physics. And really, quantum physics seems to perhaps support the fact that a prayer could occur, and a sudden change in a situation of being healed could be possible. And this is all explained or touched upon in a certain myth. So, let's let go of what's old and move forward to what's better and what's more perhaps enlightened, or let's move forward. Let's move forward with hope. So please, everybody, all believers everywhere, look at a certain myth and think again. Don't be fearful. Look forward. There's hope there in opening our eyes and our thoughts into new things. Not new things, but just to know it better. We don't know it enough. This is the problem. We've stopped at halfway. So many times throughout the centuries, we've stopped halfway in the messages about God. And this is why we've had so much trauma all the time with Inquisition and all this sort of thing. The Christian has done as bad as what the Islamic faith is doing now at the moment. So, but let's, we're enlightened now. We have the internet. Let's, as I say, be hopeful. So I leave that with you, finally, and with the media as well. I just ask the media to help in this, to spread this hope, this new investigation in what might be true about the message of God, and about this entrenchment in our lack of knowledge, and how our mind becomes entrenched in an idea we have, when in fact if we just let a little bit more knowledge in, we will see where we have gone wrong, and we will move forward in a new, completely opposite direction sometimes. So let's have hope.